So look at Anthony Ryder from South Lyon, Michigan, recently selected as the Lions 2020 Fan of the Year. He has a passion about sports broadcasting.
With the 112th selection in the 2021 NFL Draft, the Detroit Lions select Amon-Ra St. Brown, wide receiver, USC. One pride, baby! Yeah!
What is going on, everybody? Welcome back to another Detroit Lions video. Now, I think as Lions fans, we can kind of come to the conclusion that last year, Brad Holmes won undrafted free agency. I mean, I don't think you can name a football team in the NFL. I don't think any of the other 31 teams had the impact from their undrafted free agency class that the Detroit Lions had. The Lions in undrafted free agency last year got Jerry Jacobs and AJ Parker, who both played starting roles in the Lions defense a season ago, as well as signing Tommy Kramer, as well as Brock Wright, two players out of Notre Dame that maybe aren't necessarily starters going into next season and definitely aren't even competing for their number one in their position, but guys that will very much contribute next season. Brock Wright as likely a tight end too, and Tommy Kramer, if offensive line injuries strike again, he will be put into a starting role very similarly to last year. Now, not to mention, on top of that, Tavante Beckett also made the roster, and we did see a couple other undrafted free agents from a season ago make some big time impacts, or at least make the roster and compete with the Lions week in and week out. And looking into this season, I think a lot of people were very excited about the potential of the undrafted free agency. Right, this class saw a lot of different players that had draftable grades fall out of the NFL draft. Guys from Verone McKinley and Carson Strong and Justin Ross to Nefe Sewell and a couple other really key big name guys that were talked about in the draft process that simply kept falling and falling until they were no longer even a part of the 2022 draft class. And I think Brad Holmes did it again. I think Brad Holmes put together a really, really good UDFA class, and it's hard to say in the preseason, hard to say before these guys have played a snap that he won undrafted free agency, but I think he's definitely going to be in contention at the end of the year yet again to win undrafted free agency, as I think 4 of our undrafted free agents had draftable grades by my books, and 7 to 8 of them I think will either compete and make a roster spot or will be put on the practice squad going forward. So today we're going to talk about the undrafted free agency class. Today we're going to take a look at the undrafted free agents, their skills, their pros, why they were picked up by the Detroit Lions, and why Brad Holmes for the second year in a row may very well have won undrafted free agency and essentially won day 4 of the NFL draft. So with all that being said, let's get straight into talking about the Lions 2022 undrafted free agency class. Now, getting on to start off, we're going to start about the draftable players. These are all players I had a draftable grade on in the 2022 NFL draft class that just fell out of the draft. Now, these guys did not have day 2 or day 1 grades. All of these players for me were in my grades on day 3, and most of them were graded between the 6th and the 7th round. I don't even think one of these players had a 5th round pick from me, like maybe Justin Ross or Carson Strong. However, I do think that there were some draftable players that fell through the cracks and ended up being Detroit Lions for essentially zero value. The first of which was Derek Adiche Jr., the tight end from San Jose State. Derek Adiche Jr. put up over 1,100 yards on 86 receptions and had 11 receiving touchdowns as a 6'4", 235-pound tight end from the University of San Jose State. He is a really good receiver. He doesn't really have a whole lot of weaknesses to his game, although I do think he's a better receiver than he is a run blocker. He creates separation, he has some yak ability, and obviously is a pretty good player, having over 700 receiving yards and 5 receiving touchdowns as a junior in the Mountain West. His quarterback play wasn't amazing, but Derek Adiche Jr. was easily the number 1 weapon for San Jose State a season ago, and at the end of the day, I had a 6th round pick on him. And not only that, I had a high 6th round pick on Derek Adiche Jr. I had the Lions taking him in mock drafts. I had the Lions being interested in him in certain, mock offseason videos. And he fell all the way through the NFL draft to undrafted free agency, and for what was a 6th round prospect turned out to be free ammunition and turned out to be free assets for Brad Holmes on the undrafted free agency board. Another player like that was Abini Eze, the offensive tackle from TCU, standing at 6'7". 321 pounds. He is one of the biggest tackles in this year's class with truly exceptional length in his arms. He's a very good pass protector and has adequate power in the running game. He's not going to be the run blocker of a Rasheed Walker, and he's not going to be the pass blocking and have the pass pro of an Evan Neal, but he is a very, very good tackle who showed a lot of improvement at the end of the 2021 season. I think he in particular could be the biggest name to come out of this undrafted free agency class because plain and simple, he has rare ability. He has rare tools and rare length at the offensive line position, and he may not start next season. He's definitely not going to start over Decker or Sewell, but if you're talking about tackle number 3, I think as an undrafted free agent, he's going to slide in as the offensive tackle 3. If either of those players get hurt again or either of those players miss time, I think you're going to see Aziz slide straight into that tackle 3, be a really adequate pass protector, open up a few holes in the running game, and I think he's going to slide in and be a really solid depth piece for the Detroit Lions for the next 3 to 4 seasons until he re-signs with a bigger and better contract. Maybe he signs longer term with the Lions, but at the very least, I think they have a very, very good offensive tackle prospect that could have easily gone in the 6th round, in the 5th round, and they got it again, just like Derek Deese Jr. and the rest of these guys got them essentially for nothing after the NFL draft was all said and done. Now moving on to the 3rd prospect that I had a draftable grade on in this class, Demetrius Taylor, the defensive lineman from Appalachian State. Quite simply, he was uber productive at Appalachian State, at a Division I program, a program that was ranked in the top 25 multiple times over the past 2 to 3 seasons as a Division I school. He produced over 46 tackles for loss, 26 and a half sacks, and 6 forced fumbles. Now he is a little bit undersized, I would say. He is only 6'1", 290 pounds, but we have seen undersized defensive linemen make it in the NFL before. I think it gives him really good leverage in the running game, and I think it gives him really good leverage against offensive linemen in general. Now, it is going to make it harder for him to shed blocks against the longer and lengthier offensive linemen of the NFL, but he has a lot of power, he has really good leverage, and he has the production to back up at least a 7th round selection in the NFL draft. I thought he would have been gone easily in the 7th round, but he fell all the way through, and the Lions, once again, get good value in undrafted free agency. And then the last player that I had a draftable grade on from this class was Jermaine Waller, the cornerback or defensive back from Virginia Tech, putting up over 109 tackles, 5 tackles for loss, 7 interceptions, and 17 passes defended. Jermaine Walker was quite simply the best cornerback at Virginia Tech a season ago. He played along 1st-round pick Caleb Farley 2 seasons ago at this point and looked really, really good when he was getting a bulk of the targets. I think he had a 6th to 7th round grade on him as well, and the Lions just got a lot of really good value out of these players, right? A guy that can create some turnovers, a guy that had 17 passes defended, over 100 tackles, stepped up and was the easy cornerback 1 at Virginia Tech. In the ACC, where you're playing Clemson, you're playing North Carolina, you're playing Wake Forest every single week, you need a good shutdown cornerback, and Jermaine Waller did exactly that. I wouldn't be surprised if he is the Jerry Jacobs of this year's draft class, and I wouldn't be surprised if he was the Jerry Jacobs of this year's undrafted free agency for the Detroit Lions. Now, just because I didn't have a draftable grade on a few players doesn't mean that I don't think they were priority undrafted free agents, and that is the case with these next 4 players. These are guys I expected to go undrafted. These are players I did not expect to make it to a 7th round pick, and these are guys that I had undrafted free agency grades on, but they were priority undrafted free agents. And those are guys that, aren't going to go in the NFL draft, aren't going to go in the first 7 rounds, but as soon as that last pick is put in, these are the first guys you're calling. These are the first players that you were on the phone with trying to sign, and these are guys that you talked with before the pre-draft process saying, hey, if you go undrafted, we want to sign you, right? If you do end up going undrafted, we want to pick you up. We want to, sign you to the roster. We want to bring you in for training camp, and we want you to be a Detroit Lion. And these are the kind of players that I have with these next 4 guys. First of which is Corey Sutton, the wide receiver from Appalachian State. Posting over 2,200 yards and 24 touchdowns as a 6'3", wide receiver at a Division I college. That is pretty good production, really good body, really good size. I mean, has pretty good, strong hands. He kind of like last year reminds me of either like a Sage Surratt or, you know, some of the other bigger wide receivers we signed last season as undrafted free agents. May not make the roster because the wide receiver room is pretty much set at this point, but you could certainly see him being a preseason standout and certainly see him becoming a practice squad eligible player that sticks around for a year or two as he develops his skills. Khalil Pimpleton is another player that I think is going to stick around, have a really good preseason, and maybe even sneak in as that wide receiver 7 on the active roster. Khalil Pimpleton posting over 2,100 yards and 12 touchdowns is a big-time playmaker versus Central Michigan. And you may look at it and say, okay, Central Michigan, not the best competition. He played very well versus a Division I Power 5 LSU Tigers team to open the season last year for Central Michigan, and he had a really, really quietly good season. I think bringing more hometown kids in, right, it's a good story, obviously, but he's a really good dynamic playmaker. He has yak ability, has good hands, runs good routes, and if he is a preseason standout, I can see him beating out Trinity Benson for that wide receiver 7 spot. And then the last wide receiver that we will talk about is Josh Johnson, the wide receiver from Tulsa, posting over 2,100 yards and 13 touchdowns in 3 years at Tulsa. Again, just a really well-rounded, really good player. May not make the roster, may compete with Corey Sutton for that #1 practice squad wide receiver job, but at the end of the day, I think he's a pretty good wide receiver as well. And again, one of those priority undrafted free agents. And then Greg Bell, the running back from San Diego State, who posted over 1,900 rushing yards and 15 rushing touchdowns, is somebody that I also think was a pretty good pickup. I don't think he's going to make the active roster. I highly doubt he's going to beat out DeAndre Swift, Jamal Williams, Craig Reynolds, and Jermar Jefferson. But if you're talking about a practice squad guy or somebody that is going to just be depth in the preseason and maybe make it on a practice squad, kind of like Craig Reynolds did a season ago, right? Shows up, does his thing, plays really well in the preseason, and either gets a practice squad or a last-second bubble roster spot, I think you're getting good value out of an undrafted free agent from there as well. But with all that being said, those are my big undrafted free agents from this season. Again, I think going through this class, the Lions could easily have gotten one of the top UDFA classes in the entire country. And I think if you take a look at the rest of the 31 teams and their UDFA classes, I think it's going to be hard to stack up versus the Detroit Lions. They may not have gotten somebody like Justin Ross or Carson Strong or the big name players, but they certainly got a bunch of players that are going to compete for roster spots and potentially even take some roster spots from current members of the Detroit Lions. But with all that being said, that is life for you guys today. Let me know what you thought about undrafted free agency. Let me know what you thought about the class in general, and what UDFA are you excited to see hit the field for Detroit come early September. I'd be very curious what you guys think, but with all of that being said, that is life for you guys today. Thank you all so very much for watching, and until next time, and as always, go Lions.